Hello everyone, welcome to Gen Academy Talk number one. This channel will focus about technical problem, technical. We solve the matter and then we show people how to do it. And today we have our guest, Mr. Ratha, and I think you have a very strong background in technical teaching, right? So can you introduce people about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm the technical education lead at Web3 Foundation. So Web3 Foundation's flagship projects are Polkadot, which is like a blockchain, as well as Kusama, the T-shirt that I'm wearing right now. Uh, so in today's talk, I'll be giving you a brief overview about what does it take to build a blockchain. So I'll actually give a demo of a live blockchain in like a development environment. Uh, if time permits, we're gonna tweak that blockchain a little bit and learn how to write your own custom code that's going to be executed on that blockchain. But overall, I'll introduce you to development and like Polkadot ecosystem in general. Like what are the opportunities available? What kind of skills that will let you be part of the ecosystem and like blockchain technology in general.
Thank you. So So we'll talk about like instruct us how to code in blockchain, right? And in this case specifically, Polkadot and Kusama.
Exactly. So that's the thing. This session is not to teach you like how to code, but rather show you what code is already there so that you know what to do when you're actually coding. So I'll basically show you like so we have Substrate repository on GitHub that is open source, so anybody can sort of access it and then download it and run it. So we're gonna do that and then see how it works basically. And if you want to code, then you have to learn like Rust. So Rust is a programming language. So that's going to take some time for you to uh, understand and then contribute to the Substrate repo.
Alright. So the technique you show us today can be applied to AutoGen as well, or is only applied to Polkadot and Kusama?
It is basically, so Substrate is the blockchain building framework used by all the parachains in Polkadot ecosystem. So what I'm showing today is going to, I mean, the Substrate repository itself is for building blockchains, right? So you'll get an intuition of what blockchain technology is, and then you'll see like how using Substrate you can implement things like smart contracts or DeFi, or so all the applications that you have that you can build with like blockchain, you should be able to develop them using Substrate. Yeah,
Alright.
so let me tell you, like Substrate is different from like Ethereum and Solidity. So those are, I mean, Solidity, it lets you like write smart contracts, but what you're learning today is going to let you write blockchains like Ethereum. So basically, you're learning. So if smart contract dApps are like layer 2 applications, Ethereum is layer 1. So you're actually looking at Substrate that can actually build layer 0 blockchains, which can host blockchains like Ethereum or so. So this is like much more powerful in terms of the flexibility that you get as a blockchain developer.
Okay, so we're learning to build from the ground, right? Like either the layer zero, not layer one, or like layer one is Ethereum. Like Ethereum is very notable example of layer one. So we just talk about we just mentioned Ethereum, but there's all of other blockchain as well, such as Polkadot and Kusama, right? But today we'll focus on the ground, like the layer zero, like how to start from there, like start from scratch. Okay, so there's no further ado. I think you can continue, like you can start your teaching section today, and then we'll learn from that. If there's a question, if our guests or our audience have any question, then yeah, we'll say hi to them, and then we'll like address their questions, like answer them during our learning section today. Is it possible? Yeah, yeah. You can start your slides now. Thank you.
Okay. So let me start sharing this. Let's see. Share screen. All right, can you see my screen? Can someone confirm if they're able to see my screen? Hey, so
I was talking something. So we just say hi. So there's a professor from FPT University. He is a original IT teacher, and he teaches students about like original coding, and he wants to know about tech, the like blockchain tech. So super excited to have he here today. So hello, chào thầy. You can start to share the screen again. I think
yes,
it worked
so
before.
I'm having like one issue that I didn't foresee. It's not letting me share my whole screen. It's only letting me share like the browser windows. So
Maybe you can start to like play the show or something like.
yeah, so I'll try to do everything in the browser window because again this is like a high level talk. So let's try to
Okay, let's try again. Let's try again.
yeah, right.
No
Let's
worry.
do this. Share screen. All right, so let's do. Okay, so I hope everyone is able to see this slides, right?
Yes, yes, I'm seeing that. Yes,
Perfect. So yeah,
perfectly clear. Good. Okay.
very good. So let's get started. So today, I mean, the original request was to give you a broad overview of Polkadot and its ecosystem, and also I was requested to give you some overview of how to develop on Polkadot, develop on Substrate. So Substrate is the blockchain building framework that is used to develop parachains on Polkadot. So all of this will be clear like once we finish this session today. So that's why we named the session Substrate 101. So just to give you, an intuition about what Substrate is, it's actually a blockchain building framework. So you can build a blockchain from, scratch. So that's the thing. Like you already have, you need not build a blockchain from the scratch because you have access to Substrate blockchain building framework. So it's already like modular, flexible, and extensible, meaning all the code in the Substrate repository, it is organized in the form of like modules. So let's say you want to uh, as you'll see, you'd want to have few features on your blockchain. So all of those are available in modules. So those features, they're flexible, meaning you can edit the parameters inside that code, as well as add new lines of code to the existing modules. So you can take this repository like anywhere you want as a blockchain developer. And also, so Substrate, it sort of has all these like libraries which are already battle tested. So for instance, like Polkadot and Kusama, they're built on Substrate as well. So those are blockchains that have been running for years without any sort of issues. So everything related to the blockchain technology, so those libraries are well tested in the real environment. So what you as a blockchain developer will be focusing is very less on the core blockchain technology. As a blockchain developer these days, you'd be focusing on the use case for your blockchain, right? So not many people work on consensus, not many people work on networking. Most of the people like work on applications related to blockchain, like you have DeFi, you have identity solutions, you have NFTs, so on and so forth. So these are like high level use cases of blockchains. And then in Substrate, so all of that application logic is captured in libraries called frame. So these frame modules, which we name them as like palettes. So these palettes, so there are over like 100 palettes out there which are open. You can use them in your blockchain. Let me show like exactly like how they look like. For instance, there is a staking palette. So if you want to implement nominated proof of staking in your uh, blockchain, then you have like a palette that you could include, and uh, right from the beginning you have access to all these like functionalities when you start your blockchain. So in terms of like development ease, so the first thing to sort of try out is the Substrate node. So I'll demonstrate like what it is, and then what can be done with it in today's session. So this is like a template node, okay, so which is a fully functional blockchain. So you can actually start working on it from today, actually, if you want to. So you can download that repository, compile it, run it, and then see blockchain in action. And then you're able to implement custom logic in that blockchain. So frame, which I talked about earlier. So you can use the existing palettes in your blockchain, or you can add your own palette to the blockchain. And then finally, you have a lot of technical freedom with Substrate blockchain building framework. So if you're not happy with one or two aspects of Substrate core libraries, the encryption scheme it uses or the consensus it uses, you have access to modify the core libraries as well. So Substrate framework offers a lot of like flexibility for you as a developer. Yeah, so like I mentioned, you'll see this in action in today's session. So basically, if I want my blockchain to have, let's say, a few of these palettes, so out of all the palettes that are present in the Substrate repo, I can pick and choose like what I want, right? So let's say I want my blockchain to have accounts and some token and a way to like transfer these tokens between the accounts. You need not implement that logic from scratch. So you have access to balances palette, which sort of takes care of all of that. So let's say you wanted like to implement some kind of staking based like consensus on your blockchain. Again, like you have access to palettes related to staking, and so on and so forth. So it's that customizable when you choose like Substrate to build a blockchain. So this session is it's laid out as like a workshop. So we're going to briefly see what's there in the Substrate node, brief look at like what is the Substrate node template, a Substrate palette. I'm going to give you a brief walkthrough of that as well, and then finally show you how to innovate with whatever you see today. So
Yeah. So just a small question before you start a new one. So basically, when you talk about subtract, then you talk about like the Can you move to the previous slide when you have like the three subtract nodes, subtract like there are three of them before. Sorry.
this one.
Yeah. Yeah. So the palettes is there for you to choose on, right? Like you have a source for on GitHub, for example. So just go come there and download the facilities or the yeah the yeah you just come there and choose the facility that you want, and you want to have that in your subtract. So you just download the ready code from the internet. Is that what you mean from the first one? Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, let me open that GitHub repository. I think that's going to make a lot of sense. So GitHub Substrate. I'll probably share that with. Stop sharing this, and then screen. All right. Okay, so you can see my screen, right?
Not yet.
Interesting. Okay, let me share it again. How about now?
No.
Strange. It sort of worked.
Now it's working. Maybe you wait for it for a while and it start to work.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it's kind of similar to how you share. No, it's working.
It's
Great.
working.
Yes.
Great,
Perfect.
great. So let's go to frame. So this is Parity Tech, like Substrate. So Parity is the developer of like Substrate and Polkadot. So if you go to the Substrate repo, and then if you look at like frame, so whatever I showed there, those boxes, so they are all available here. So balances, so if you go to the source code of balances, so lib.rs file, so this is all coded in Rust. So,
Okay.
so here you have like everything, like so there are, so in Rust, like you can give all these like types that you want in here. So you also provide so what's called like traits. So you need to implement them in your blockchain code. So this gives you like access to all the functions, like set balance, transfer balance, force transfer, all of these. Like all of these are like available for you, and then you should be able to configure them in your blockchain code. So you basically import them. I was going to like actually show you how you do it as well. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for your little like real time, real life experience example that you just showed me. Yeah. So basically all the palettes you can find online on GitHub. Depends on just find the source over there and then probably you're gonna find them. Like the people gonna share them for free. So you just get a source and how and get to know how to implement them to the the picture that you want to paint about a blockchain.
Exactly. So in assets palette, you can like create assets like ERC20 tokens on Ethereum. So you should be able to mint assets on like Polkadot. So
Mm.
like
Is
basically we
there a
have
limit? Is there a limit of how many substrate, how many frame that you can download and then implement them to into your final blockchain?
there is
Final-
absolutely no limit. Like whatever you download and build as your blockchain, you can use any of these palettes. You can modify the code in these palettes. You can fork them and then sort of like do whatever you want. So for instance, like assets also has like NFTs implementation. So if you want to take it a little further, you can do that. So a lot of like Polkadot hackathons, so people use either these palettes as like a base code and then improve on them, or like
Uh,
create like a new palettes for anybody to use. So the
uh,
beauty of this is right now I can show, I'm sharing the screen, right? Like Polkadot.js. So can you still see my screen?
yes, it's perfect. This
Perfect.
time it's perfect.
Oh yeah. So I'll zoom in a little bit, and so I'm actually accessing like Polkadot blockchain to show you like what's happening here. So in the Polkadot, let's see like what parachains are there. Okay, so there are about like 28 blockchains that are actually running on top of like Polkadot, because layer zero Polkadot is layer zero blockchain, and all of these blockchains, they have like their own block numbers. If you see, statement has over 2 million blocks. Akala has like 1.9 million blocks or whatever. So these are like actual blockchains, and these are running on top of Polkadot, and each of these blockchains have their own custom logic. So if you go to their like repositories, you'll see that they've used like Substrate. They've used some palettes from Substrate and developed their own palettes. Okay, so that's how all of these projects are sort of use Substrate to create their own blockchain, and then they're integrated to Polkadot to sort of uh, you know so which I'll explain like later how this parachains are going to be working on Polkadot. But yeah, so this should give you an idea of what's happening.
Yes, how it look like and how they implement them into like real cases when there's
Exactly. So I
yeah,
can show you briefly like where these palettes can be accessed. So in the developer tab, you have extrinsics. So here
yeah.
you have like all the palettes, right? So you have
Okay,
options,
okay.
balances. So if you create your own palette, they'll be shown here. So for instance, let me go to Akala, which is like uh, a blockchain that's built with Substrate. So if you go extrinsics, so here they have like their own palettes, like Akala Oracle, a Dex, a registry, and then they have Dex Oracle. So you don't EVM accounts. You don't see them on Polkadot because this is a palette that they developed, and then they're making it available through their blockchain. Does that make sense?
Okay, so basically there's substrate that you can see them how they code them, and there's substrate that you cannot see, which they don't share, right? The substrate they don't share, so we cannot see them.
Like, can you repeat that question?
Sorry. So basically, you just show me that how Akala is it composed of those substrate, right?
The palette. Yeah.
The palette. Sorry, the
Right.
palette. So Akala is a substrate which is built of those palettes, and there are palettes that we can check the codes, and there are palettes that we couldn't check the code because they developed them just themselves.
Yeah. So they may be like enterprise or whatever. So whatever palettes you have on like the Substrate repository, all of them are open. You can fork them, you can modify them, you can use whatever you want and build on top of it. And there are few parachains that have their repository like open as well, so you could also check like what goes on. And then even like Web3 Foundation has a grants program, so any sort of parachain team that gets a grant, I can also share that with you. So if you go to p.polka.network and then go to open source stack. So everything that is open source and its status. So basically, if you're looking to build, let's say, something related to staking. Okay, so this is like a GitHub repository. So if you click on this, like you have access to like that GitHub repository of all these like open source things. So hope that makes sense.
Yes, okay, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, just to show like the audience today, if they want to, looking for more palettes, more framework that's ready to use, and where they can find them, and then how they can implement them into the final work, for example, or they just want to come there to have a reference of how they code in blockchain. That would be great example of how you find a resource.
Yeah, so I'm getting there. So let's
Yeah.
go.
Okay. Thank you. So
uh,
yeah, you can continue. You can come back with the teaching
to the
material.
presentation.
Yeah.
To share screen, Chrome tab, and then okay. Is it working? Perfect. You can see the screen now, right? Can you see the screen? Just give me a.
Yes, I can see the screen perfectly.
Perfect. So let's move on.
Yes.
Um, like I mentioned, all the networks I showed you earlier, like Polkadot, Akala, or all the parachains, so they are all like blockchains, right? So they are not running on a central server. So basically, they are like distributed networks that are running on blockchain nodes. So uh, all of them are running on like substrate based nodes. So the networking aspect, it's taken care by lib peer-to-peer protocol. Again, like you don't have to go in depth about that. So it's like it's developed by the people who develop like IPFS protocol as well. So it takes care of all the blockchain node and networking aspect. So that is taken care of. And then the core logic of the blockchain, which we call like runtime, everything to do with like the balances or staking or any sort of custom logic that you want to include in the blockchain. So that is going to be executed in WebAssembly. So this is the technology of choice made by Polkadot. And even like Ethereum and other ecosystems would like to like switch to like WebAssembly. So WebAssembly is like it's like a virtual machine that's very highly compatible like across like all the platforms. Like it can natively run on like browsers, and it's basically like a code blob. It's like a virtual machine in itself. You include all the code, and that blob sort of executes all the things you want across like different platforms. And finally, like grandpa, it's the you can think of it as like a finality gadget. It's for the consensus. So this was developed by the Web3 Foundation researchers. So if you don't have to worry about like blockchain block finality. So this is like a plug and play. So you can use this for consensus in your blockchains. So the other interesting thing I want to show today is the Substrate node template. So right now, I think Rosie just asked, where to get started to experience all these palettes and then sort of make improvements to them. So it is this particular repository. It's available at Substrate Developer Hub as Substrate template node. I'm going to quickly open that and share that particular screen with you. Okay, so let's see what we have. There you go. So you can see the node template code right there. So what I'm going to do is, so you can clone this repository on your desktop and then sort of execute it. Or if you want to just try it out without like executing everything, so we have what's called a playground. So a playground is so this is Substrate playground. This runs on the cloud. So it sort of creates a node template for you. You can try it out. It's actually playground.substrate.dev. And for those of you who are attending this talk, so the slides are available. Let me share the link to the slides. Or if Rosie, you can share the link to the slides. The slides have like the hyperlinks for all of these, so they'll be able to like see things in action. But anyway, so once you sort of run the Substrate template node, so everything you see here is the code from Substrate template node. So once you run that, you already have this blockchain up and running. Okay, so you have block 1, block 2 that is being produced. If you want to see this blockchain in action, so you can go to Playground and open Polkadot.js apps. So I'm going to share that screen. Yeah, I'm sorry I'm switching between so many screens because this wouldn't let me share my whole screen. So let's say share screen, Chrome tab. All right, so let's do this. Okay, can you see my screen now? Okay, so basically this Substrate, so Polkadot.js is just like a UI, like it lets you interact with the, any sort of like Substrate based node. So whatever is happening on that particular like blockchain node that I created, so it is showing it with like a better UI. So right from the beginning, like let's see like what all palettes are included in that particular blockchain. So if you see, yeah, so by default it has like balances, so balances for like account transfer. So you can see that there are few accounts that are preloaded with some tokens for you to like play around with. So let me send some, let's say I'm going to send some tokens to uh, other account here, like let's say Charlie. Make transfer, sign and submit. Okay, so it got reduced, and then where is Charlie? Yeah, so Charlie got like 1 million units right there. So this Substrate template node, right from the beginning, has it's basically a blockchain. It keeps adding blocks, like every 6 seconds you have like a new block being added. So whatever events that happen on the blockchain, so all the transactions are put into the blocks, so you can clearly see that Alice sent Charlie like so many tokens, and then the balance of Charlie has changed. So it's basically a fully functional like blockchain node with very minimal bare bones functionality. um, and yeah, so now what I'll do is, so you've already seen that this blockchain node works. So we're going to see like how to add custom logic to this particular blockchain node, and see that reflected in this place. So I'll pause here. So any questions for whatever I've shown so far?
So you just show us the you just show those are the address of the most recent block created, right?
Yeah, so basically what you're seeing on the screen is, so Substrate Playground, it just initiated a Substrate template node instance. So if you downloaded the same code on your computer and then compiled it, it will also start a Substrate node template instance. And if you so you can interact with it using like Polkadot.js. So,
Oh,
so
all right. So it's that easy to be a node on Polkadot.
exactly. So you're directly working on like a blockchain that is running. So for instance, the same interface you can use to check like what's happening on Polkadot, right? So you have on Polkadot you have like 12 million blocks. It is like a blockchain that is running in the production level. So here you have like development, right? So this is where um, so if you're developing something locally, then it'll be available at this address.
Mm.
So in the custom endpoint, if you see, it's connected to the playground instance that I initiated. So this is my GitHub ID. It's playground substrate, and then let's switch there. And yeah, so it's connected to. So you see this block number 46. So let me go to the Substrate playground that is active there, and you'll see like it's also similar there. Let's go there. And I'll walk you through like the code in the Substrate node template, so you get an idea of what to change and what to leave as is.
Okay, okay. So basically, you just show us like if you run that substrate node, then what it looks like, and then how you become a node operator, right?
Yes.
And you just the last node is like that blockchain it was having like 47 blockchain like blocks in total, and it's
Yep.
like producing constantly the blocks. Okay.
Hmm.
Mm. Alright, now basically now, you just like showcase us like how it look in real life before you start to show us how to code, right?
Exactly.
Alright, alright, alright.
Okay. So let's see if this is able to show the screen. Okay, share screen, Chrome tab, Substrate playground, and share. Tell me when you're able to like see the screen. You can see the screen now, right? Okay, so here you can see the actual node in action in the command line prompt. So earlier you saw like 50 blocks there. So clearly, so we are at 64. So let's say I'll stop this. Okay, so now we halt at this blockchain, and again, like as a developer, you have like full control over your blockchain and the code that goes into it. So let me briefly show you um, all the folders that are there in the Substrate node, and then tell you like where exactly you need to work on as a blockchain developer if you're trying to build a custom blockchain application. So the first folder here of importance is the node folder. So in the node folder, you have the chain spec. So this is the chain specification. So here is where you're telling like your chain from the beginning, like what values it should have. So let's go to chain spec. Yeah, so if you scroll through like the chain spec code, you'll see that there is Alice, there is Bob, and then there are a bunch of like other accounts whose public and private seeds. So they're already known. So you have like full control over them. That's why I was able to sign that balance transaction between like Alice and like Charlie, because that's pretty much like public knowledge. So all of these are there, and then yeah. So chain spec, it gives like the initial state for the blockchain, and from that, like, so again, like all the other stuff here, you need not bother about them. So you won't be changing much about the command line instructions for the node, or the RPC calls that it supports. So you don't have to worry about all of these. The two important folders of some relevance to a blockchain developer who's trying to develop on Substrate are these two. So one is palettes. So right now we have a template palette, right? So if you go to the source code of the template palette, it's just like the bare bones, like basic code. So you don't have much. It's just like the template code that is available there. You can't do much with this either. So the two calls that you can make to this particular palette are do something and uh, cause error. So very generic like calls. But for other palettes, you have much more refined well developed calls. Like I showed earlier, the balances palette, which had force transfer, set balance, and all of these. So if you were to create like your own palette, you'll basically be modifying the code in here. So here is where you'll give the logic. So let's say you're developing a palette for identities. Okay, so decentralized digital identities. So you'll write all the functions, all the types that are required in here. But for now, let's not do any changes to this. So you asked me earlier, like how can we include an external palette, from the Substrate code base into this blockchain node. So I'm going to show that to you right now. So let's go to yeah. So let's go to runtime. So runtime is the brains of the blockchain. So this is where all the core logic of the blockchain is going to be instantiated. So here, for those of you who are aware of like Rust programming in general, so cargo is like the package manager for Rust. So this cargo toml file takes care of all the dependencies. Okay, so basically what the Substrate template node is doing is it's directly importing all these palettes from the Substrate repository. Where is it being like written? So in cargo toml file, you have, okay, palette aura, get me this version from the GitHub repository of parity tech substrate.git. Okay, so palette balances, get me this version, and so on and so forth from that. So this is where all the drag and drop thing that I demonstrated to you in the slide, it is basically this. So just for um, you know demonstration purpose, I'm going to import a palette called as nix. So a nix palette is basically for adding nicknames to the account. So earlier you saw like Alice, Bob, and Charlie in the blockchain, right? So with Nix palette, you can edit their names on the blockchain. I can add like a nickname for Alice to something else, like Web3 Foundation or so. So I'm going to show how easy it is to add that custom functionality to this particular blockchain. So yeah, any question?
So basically, you just previously you show us the UX UI of the like how the website will look like to average users, and this is like behind the scene, right? So it's a
Exactly.
code behind it. Ah, okay.
Exactly. So earlier I showed like an extrinsics dropdown. It had like balances, it had like grandpa, pseudo, and all of these, right? So this is where the palette code was imported in the cargo toml file. So all you're saying is like, palette balances, fetch it from this particular GitHub repository. So I'm adding like a new line, this line 21 that I'm adding. So I'm adding a new palette called as Nix. So it is already there. It lets you add nicknames to the blockchain accounts. For instance, like Alice, Bob, we can change it to like Radha and Rosie or whatever if we want. Okay.
Yes, yes.
All right.
Well,
So
then
let's
what is the palette grandpa? What does it do? Like if Nix is like changing a nickname, then what is palette grandpa do?
Yeah, I showed earlier that grandpa is one of the core technologies for consensus.
Ah,
So this is how like the blocks get finalized on the blockchain. So on Bitcoin, the finality is probabilistic. Like you add more blocks, and the transaction in like previous blocks is final. So that is probabilistic. But grandpa is like a finality gadget. So once this gadget says a particular block is final, it is final. So all that
oh,
code is in here. You don't have to like write it from scratch. So
mm,
so your blockchain is going to add blocks, and the finality is taken care by this. So again, like palette randomness, collective flip. So this is if you want to introduce like some kind of randomness in your chain. So all the functions are available here. So palette pseudo. So pseudo is like the high level privilege that you have on the blockchain. So this gives you like access to every aspect of the blockchain. You can issue pseudo commands through this like palette. Yeah. So
okay.
basically, all of these palettes, the code is available online, open, so you can take a look at like the individual functionalities. But yeah, so to include like a new palette which is already there in that library, you just add that line. Okay, so you disable the default features here. Uh, so this topic is a little too deep for this particular session, but this is because we are compiling this code into like a wasm blob. If you remember, I mentioned like the WebAssembly, which is like a virtual machine. So by default, we disable the default features and then enable them. You know the standard features right here. But again, like I won't go into depth about all this because you just follow the instructions given in the tutorial. So let's go and yeah, so palette balances, let's just add the standard features here. This is something that we're doing for every individual palette. Enable the standard features um, later on after like the wasm is blob is sort of compiled. Anyway, so we are here, and that's it. Like this is what you need to do in the cargo toml file to import the code. So far, so good.
Yeah, so basically we like have the basic idea about what is a palette, how it help, and like how it look. UX, like the UX UI look of it, and the behind scene look of it, and like the yeah.
Yeah.
So we can
So
move on next one if yeah.
yeah, exactly. So now I imported the code into, you know, this particular cargo.toml file. So this is a package manager. So what happens is when we compile this project, it's going to make sure that these the code from these libraries that I specified here, all of that is included. So now, just because it is included doesn't mean it is included in the blockchain runtime. So the blockchain runtime is actually available in here. So in the runtime source folder, like this lib.rs file, so that is where all the core logic of the blockchain is. So for instance, let me show some things in here. Let's scroll down a little bit. Okay, so for instance, take a look at this. So here you have an option to adjust like the block time as well. So for instance, you have so here it's saying like 6,000 milliseconds, which is like 6 seconds. What I'm going to do is change it to like 1,000 milliseconds, which is like 1 second. Okay, so
Okay.
the next time I compile this sort of blockchain node, the blocks will be produced like every second instead of every 6 seconds.
Uh,
And there are plenty of parameters that you can change here if you want. But yeah, so for every palette that we sort of included, so palette randomness collective flip or palette aura. So let me go to something that is familiar, which is palette balances, right? So you can see palette balances requires you to specify values for some of the types. So the number of locks a particular account can have is 50. So if you want to if you want to increase this number to 100, you can do it that way. Uh, so existential deposit, it's like the minimum amount of tokens an account should have for it to exist on chain. So if you want to increase it, you can also change those values here. So hope this is making sense. So the palette code, it doesn't hard code these values. It gives you as a blockchain developer to customize and add those values as you need. Okay, so let's do that. And then so what I'm going to do is I'll add, so the next palette, so because the nickname, a nickname can have like a minimum length, it needs to have like a maximum length. All of those are like specified in the palette. So here we have to sort of implement those types. So what I'm going to do is I'll switch to a different screen again. So I'll show you the next palette tutorial and then include all that code in the Substrate playground and show everything in action just now. All right, so let's share screen, Chrome tab. Let's go there. All right, so can you see my screen? No, you can see my screen now. All right, so everything related to Substrate. So it's Substrate development. You can find it here. So I'm going to send that in the chat. I'll request Rosie to share the link for Substrate docs as well. So here, if you go, so there is like get started section. So this will get you started with like Substrate development, right? So first you need to understand like how to install the Rust toolchain. So which Substrate depends on. So depending on like the operating system that you have, there are slightly different instructions on how to install like everything. So once you have like everything installed, then it's time for you to go to the hands-on activities. Okay, so the hands-on activity I was showing to you earlier is working with palettes. adding a palette to runtime. So yeah, so
So basically,
basically,
this is like the introduction of like for a person who wants to know about substrate, right? So basically, it's like how to do from very like bullet points that like you, from scratch, and then divide into different criteria that you want to find out more substrate. Because there's a question from our viewer like where to start, is it difficult, like is there any assistance that I might have. So I think this website, the website that we just pinned, is a very good one to start when you want to learn about substrate.
exactly. So Substrate docs, like everything I've discussed so far in the workshop, all of the topics are like well documented with like examples. So for instance, like adding a Nix palette, a nicknames palette is a standalone tutorial that I'm showing here. So basically, the Nix palette. Okay, um, so if you click on that, it'll take you to like that GitHub link to the source code of like Nix palette. So you'll see that it already implemented these three functions like set name. So it adds name to that blockchain account, and then there is a function called clear name. So if you're not happy with your nickname, you can like clear it. There is also an option to kill name. Like if someone is misusing name on the blockchain, like the one with the pseudo access or like the governance. If it's like a decentralized blockchain, the root call can be accessed through governance. So you can initiate this particular uh, you know call
Yeah,
through,
the
that, and
function.
then sort of like remove that.
Yes.
But anyway, so what we did earlier, so I already added this line of code, if you remember. So I
Yes,
added,
yeah, I remember that. Yes, you
yeah,
changed the
so
nickname from Bob Alice to Rosie and Radha, for example. I remember that.
uh, I meant so the in the cargo.toml file, uh, in the cargo.toml file, I added like palette nix, the
Yeah.
version name, and then default features so false, and then like the GitHub repository to import that from. And then I also like enabled the standard features in the cargo.toml file. So that is something that is already done. So the next thing that we have to do is the core logic of the blockchain. It's in the runtime folder. So I showed you in the balances palette you could like modify the number of locks, or you could modify the existential deposit as you please. So in the next palette, so as you can see, similarly there is, for every nickname created, there is like a reservation fee. Okay, so this is something that you can set. There is the minimum length for the nickname. So for Radha or Rosie to be added to the blockchain, if we set like a minimum length 8, it won't allow us to do it. So we can reduce it to like 5, and then make this like 20 or 25. So it's totally up to us. So this code actually goes into the core lib.rs file in the runtime. So let me copy this code. Okay, and then
Yes.
what we have to do finally to just add this palette to the blockchain is there is another like construct runtime module. Okay, so now that we imported the code from the repository, we implemented the types, setting like the values to 4 or 5. Finally, we have to construct all the runtime. All of this has to be packaged together to work together. So this particular block of code takes care of that. So you're going to add this line of code there, and that's it. So you basically finish adding that palette to the blockchain. So let's see this in action. I think we're running out of time. I won't waste time, and then I'll just show you all of this in action in the demo right there.
Yes, yes. Let's get into practice.
Yes, so let's stop this and then share screen, playground. All right. Are there any questions in the chat?
Well, the chat they pin it just like, and then how do you learn about substrate and any advice for newbie? And I think we just answer that question by like following read the instruction on the website like docs.substrate.io. I think like and we just I think we can find most of the information over there, like the basic information. And yeah, a good example also. And now if they watch our video, they're gonna see like how we put them into practice like right now, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's do that. So I have palette balances, types implemented here. So I copied that code that I just showed right here. Okay. So I'm implementing palette nix. So I told you that we have to reduce the minimum length to 5. Okay, so that's the only way we'll be add both our names as nicknames. Um, and after this is done, we have what's called construct runtime. In here, I'm going to add the other line of code that's mentioned in the tutorial, which is this one. Okay, so where is this? Balances, so right below. Okay. So what happens is in the user interface earlier, when you went to the extrinsics tab, you saw like balances and other things. So adding it here will show like this name, like Nix palette in that dropdown. And that's it. Like this was all that was needed for adding a new palette into the Substrate runtime code. So what I'll do is build this. So this is going to take some time. So cargo, like I mentioned, it's the package manager. So we're going to like build this whole thing. So now it is like fetching, all the libraries, and then it's resolving like the dependencies. So everything that we included in cargo toml file. Okay, so here you see all these palette aura balances, nicks, and so on and so forth, and all these libraries. It's sort of fetching all of them, and then sort of ensuring like all of them compile very well.
So it doesn't not like too difficult to do it, right? Like basically you just run it in within like minutes because you know
Um,
you're doing it, and then
yeah, so this, depending upon your machine speed, it takes some time. So because like Rust, especially like Substrate repo, when it compiles, it has to, it's basically compiling the entire blockchain node. Okay, so including all the libraries, and then giving you like an executable for the blockchain node. So that is what it's doing here. So let's see. So once this finishes like compiling, I'll demonstrate to you.
so it
Yeah.
depends
So
on the yeah.
I think, like in the interest of time, I'll let this compile. I'm going to switch to the slides again and then convey a few important points. Uh,
Yes, yes.
let's
We
start.
can actually, because like this is our first section of the workshop, and we wanna have like many session ahead, right? Like to go like access every matter like one by one. So since we don't have like, because the time a bit rush and we don't have too many students today, we'll split our lesson today into like half or like or two thirds, something like that, and then we'll go on with the next one in the next section when we do the marketing like better. Then when more student will be like here to ask the questions, and it will be easy for them to watch us live since they can ask you like immediately when they have questions. This will be like a reply for them, no worry. This video will be saved. But yeah, if the next time they join us earlier, and then of course they can follow us follow us real time, that will be easier and better for them and for us also.
Yep, that works. So let me see. Yeah, and also like we need to work on sharing the entire screen thing in
Yes.
next tutorial so that it goes like seamlessly. Um,
Yes.
all right, so let's do. Let me know when you can see these slides.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but it takes I think few seconds to process, and it will be there. Mm, a bit longer than usual, I think. Now it's here. All right, now it's here.
Oh, you can see. All right, all right. So basically, what I showed to you was the code from Substrate template node, and then I showed you everything on Playground. Like this is something you can use, when you don't want to like configure anything, but still want to like understand like what Substrate is. All you need is like a GitHub account, so you should be able to open a session and then sort of explore the Substrate node. So once that thing compiles, like on polka.js, you can see, in the extrinsics tab, you should be able to see like nicks listed right there. So in nicks palette, you have like set name, and then I'm naming Alice as like Web3 Foundation, and then I submit the transaction, and then it should sort of change the name to like Web3 Foundation. So it's that simple and intuitive. So I think maybe before like the next session, you can give this activity a try to set up all the Substrate template node, change, follow the instructions to add like Nix palette to the Substrate template node, compile it, and then you know try to play around with like the Nix palette right there, and then we can go through like the next version, which is writing the palette code on your own. So for here we have like what's called like a Substrate kitties workshop. So basically, it's kind of like an imitation of crypto kitties, where you can actually create a kitty. You can mint a kitty, you can sell the kitty, or you can put it for auction. Or so there's a lot of functionalities that particular tutorial has, and you'll see like how to write code for that, and sort of execute it. So that will be the next step. Once you understand how to add existing code to the blockchain, the next step would be to understand like how to add your own code, like your own custom logic to the blockchain. So that'll be the next step.
Mm,
um,
yeah.
and in terms of like frame, like the libraries that I mentioned, we so far like focused on palettes, which are like custom logic things. But if you want to modify anything related to Substrate, you can take a look at like these libraries. So for instance, SP means Substrate primitives. SC means a Substrate client, so client to do with like the Substrate node. Substrate frame, like how these palettes, all of them are composed together. So all of that code is in here. And yeah, so that should give like more insight into like what I showed earlier. Like you start here with Substrate node, you mess around with like Substrate frame and palettes, and then look into like Substrate core aspects. Yep.
Perfect. So basically, that's a route of how you like fully apply the substrate, right? It's from substrate node, substrate frame, and then it comes to the final and most important substrate node, core. I mean,
Right, exactly.
and we learn from scratch, like from how to do like substrate node. With we show you show us then how to operate a node, and then like producing blocks, and then the substrate frame, like to do the basic function, like for example changing nicknames, and yeah. Um, that's an easy one for me to understand, so I remember like changing nickname, and then substrate
Exactly.
core. Substrate core is what we learn like next time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I mean,
Okay.
Substitute Core, like you need not even like learn. Like it's developed by the core like developers, like blockchain developers. So as like an application developer on blockchain, you would never have to like even. So it gives you the option to change it, but typically people don't change it. Like usually you use like what is out there, and then focus more on like the the Substrate frame aspect of it, like what kind of applications you can develop with it. Okay, so the node is compiled now. So I'm going to show you like a live demo of changing the nicknames. Let's do that.
Perfect.
All right, so 6. All right, so let me stop sharing this and then go to share screen. All right, so let me know when you can see it.
This time is fast. It's there already.
It's there? Okay. So you see Nix got added here, like developer extrinsics, and then here you see Nix, and then you have set name. So for Alice, let's do okay, and then submit this transaction. So because I mentioned as a blockchain developer, you have like full access to all these keys. So I'm signing on behalf of Alice, and then now you see like in accounts, Alice is no longer Alice, so she's Rosie. And then if I want to change like let's say Bob to Nix, and then set name. So let's try to set something with like 3 letters. So if I submit this transaction, the blockchain throws an error saying, it is too short, because we already, in the Nix palette, there is already this code that checks the length of the nickname given. And if it is lesser than like the minimum length that we specified, which is 5, it is going to throw an error like this. So let's do and submit. And then so from now on, like that particular name is Radha. And then you can also explore like clear name. So clearing the name just requires you to again like submit and sign the transaction, pay the transaction fee, and then it's back to like Bob. So I hope like this gave you a brief intuition about like what Substrate blockchain building framework is, what it is capable of, where to find the information, and playing around with like a Substrate template node, and seeing like what you can do. So this is where like all the developers in Polkadot ecosystem, they go through these tutorials, and then they learn, and then they sort of implement advanced like blockchain applications.
Yes. I think you show us pretty clear, and to me as a non-tech background, I don't have a tech background, but still like basically understand like the function of the substrate frame. And I understand that there's like 3 layer of the substrate, like substrate node, substrate frame, and then substrate core, in which then substrate frame is like one of the thing that like developers pay the most attention about, because like they usually change it to modify it, personalize it to to match with the application that they are doing. So, and in today's lesson, we also know like where to access the free resource of the subtract, and where to find instruction one by one, details, very details about like how to set up a subtract, or how to download them, how to implement them into a blockchain. And you also showcase like show us a real example how you just quickly change and modify the substrate. So I think substrate. I mean, and I think like basically if they students like non for IT student is very an easy session today, that they basically know the basic idea about substrate. And yeah. In the next lesson, then what will we learn about? Or is anything you want to you add more to like today's lesson? Like, what is the highlights of today's lesson? I mean,
Yeah, I think so. I just want to like highlight this the UI as well. So if you remember, we changed the block time to 1 second as well from 6 seconds. So every single second you have like a block that is being produced. So Substrate sort of gives all this enormous like control over like everything related to like blockchain. And I think in the next session, like if we plan something, I'll be interested to show how these substrate based chains can become like parachains on Polkadot. Like, so if you want to deploy that as a parachain on Polkadot, so there's some procedure for that. And then I can also like show briefly like how to create like your own palette. Again, for that you need like knowledge of Rust, like Rust programming. So anyone with like Rust background will be able to appreciate that session more. But again, it also gives you like a benchmark of what level of Rust programming you need to know to be able to like create like a palette and Substrate. So both ways it'll be like a useful session where the viewers can sort of get a understanding of how much effort is required from their end to create blockchains using Substrate.
I think the beginning, the first step is it looks easy, right? To step into blockchain, and gradually it will escalate from there.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, just I think it's easy so that we can lure new students into learning about blockchain, and then later we're not gonna show them like some challenge. I think. Yeah.
Hmm.
I think today we just wrap up here as the easy step, and then next time we will we'll plan the content, plan the agenda, the teaching agenda, the learning agenda ahead, and then we'll let the student know ahead of time what they are gonna learn today, so that they will prepare something in advance, and maybe prepare some question also, so that you can answer them more questions.
Okay, yeah, that'll work.
Yeah, but thank you very much for today. You just show us like the very basic thing that without you, I probably gonna never looking for that information. So it's great to know. I know a bit of tech now, so if anyone talk to me about blockchain tech, I can talk to them for a while. So thank you very much for your time today. And I think our audience, like whoever watching right now, they gonna know have the basic knowledge about Substrate, know about a bit of Polkadot, the basic layer of Kusama, for example, and then we'll have the base to learn more about blockchain technology. Thank you
Sure.
very much.
All
Yeah,
right. Take care.
yeah.
Bye bye.
All right, thank you. Have a nice day. Thank you for your time. Bye bye.